Right now, a Ukrainian missile strike on Moscow, the new superweapon of the Ukrainian armed forces, has amazed everyone. A terrifying strike on Russia. Urgent. Finland sounds the alarm. Russians have invaded its territory. Putin is gathering a massive force in Belarus. This is a new attack. Shock in the USA, Los Angeles is engulfed in flames, Marines have been deployed. And also, Zelensky has leaked Orban's secret plan, and it's a shock. All this and more in our program Hotspot. The Kremlin is terrified. Ukraine has created a killer missile capable of destroying Moscow. Soon, explosions at Russian military facilities will be even more powerful and spectacular, because now Ukraine has its own ballistic missile. Domestic engineers have developed it and have already successfully tested it in combat conditions. What will this change on the front lines, and how far can the Ukrainian missile reach? Watch this.
At a time when Russian aggression continues unabated, Ukraine's long-range weaponry is becoming not only a symbol of strength, but also a real guarantee of security.
Our missile program is a good one. The missile program is showing good progress. And although it's a difficult task, we are gradually getting closer to being able to use our own missiles rather than relying solely on supplies from our partners.
In 2025, there was a breakthrough in the production of Ukrainian missiles. The greatest anticipation was around the production of a domestic ballistic missile. And now it has happened.
I believe that the curators made the right choice, both in separating the program from other projects and in assigning each missile system and missile type its own curator and manager. That's a positive development. As far as I know, in mid-May, tests were conducted that are considered extremely successful. The missile traveled almost 300 kilometers and destroyed a Russian command post. And it's very important that this was a combat use.
A Ukrainian-made ballistic missile traveled almost 300 kilometers and destroyed a Russian command post.
The warhead of this missile weighs over 400 kilograms, and that's a very powerful arsenal. For comparison, the new American ballistic missile has a warhead of only 91 kilograms. It's clear that this will be a powerful weapon for us. I hope that we will continue to move forward.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly said that the Ukrainian ballistic missile is already on the way.
I have instructed that separate funding be specifically allocated to our Ukrainian ballistic program to accelerate missile production.
One of the versions currently circulating claims that the armed forces of Ukraine have already been attacking enemy targets with ballistic missiles for a year. After all, many experts and analysts have, from time to time, been unable to identify the weapon used to destroy enemy targets.
The first time successful results were announced was by the president, I believe sometime in July or August of last year. And since then, there have been several instances when strikes on Russia have led to the assumption that Ukrainian ballistic missiles were involved in these attacks on Russia.
The domestic ballistic missile is truly an impressive breakthrough for the Ukrainian defense industry.
Ukraine had been working on such projects even before the war began. And some of these projects were already at the stage of being almost ready, that is, at the prototype level, ready to be adopted into service. Ukraine needs to develop its own missile program. And this missile program, which essentially took shape in 2023, or the developments that were in a more or less prepared or finished state were brought together and used to work on creating Ukraine's own ballistic missile.
Some assume that this referred to the Ukrainian ballistic missile system Sapsan, which the president of Ukraine mentioned last year.
Nowhere is it stated the missile type, what it will be called, or its specifications. In fact, it's more the internal components that have been modernized, not so much the external appearance as the internals. And now all the necessary organizational and management structures have been established to actively move this project forward.
After successful testing, the Ukrainian ballistic missile tactical system is expected to go into mass production.
The optimal option would be a missile with a range of up to 700 well, around 700 kilometers, and a warhead equipped with a good guidance system that ensures high accuracy, with a payload of at least 200 kilograms. Of course, If it's more, that's even better.
This would allow us to deliver serious strikes against the entire military-industrial complex of the enemy.
A missile with a range of 300 kilometers and a 400-kilogram warhead, as stated in the specifications for this missile, will allow us to destroy targets at the operational and tactical operational depth. This is also very good because, in fact, all command and control, all military logistics, all depots, they are located in this zone.
Ukraine has already made attempts to develop a ballistic missile over the past 30 years. At that time, domestic capabilities were limited by the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty.
Everyone remembers when the Oreshnik appeared, we learned that there was a treaty on intermediate and shorter range missiles. What was it about? It was about the fact that the countries and the parties to this treaty are Russia and the United States do not engage in the development of intermediate range missiles. And the intermediate range missile, meaning ballistic missiles, one with a range from 500 to 5,500 kilometers. And when Trump, while he was president, first learned from intelligence that the Russians were developing the RS-26 missile with a range of less than 5,500 kilometers, he broke off, he withdrew from this treaty, and then Russia also withdrew from the same treaty.
A country undertakes obligations to produce missiles with a range of no more than 500 kilometers, but that's for domestic use.
If they produce them for export, then the range must not exceed 300 kilometers. So I think that the Ukrainian development of a ballistic missile is currently within the framework of export restrictions, but I am almost certain that its range will be increased to 500 kilometers.
The Ukrainian defense industrial complex is making successful progress in developing weaponry.
I think it will evolve towards a 500-kilometer range. Perhaps the warhead might be slightly reduced, but I think most likely even without reducing the warhead.
Ukraine's missile program is a strategic factor in the country's security. This is a breakthrough and a trump card for a country defending itself against Putin and his military machine. The development and production of Ukrainian missiles will allow the country to independently address the destruction of Russia's military capabilities in its aggressive war against Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
America is on fire. US Marines are already in Los Angeles to suppress the people's uprising. Could a coup really be coming? Meanwhile, Trump himself has turned to Putin for help. Shocking! Zelensky warns Hungary is preparing to occupy Zakarpattia. Hungarian spies are already hard at work. The details will surprise you. Watch this.
Ukrainian President Zelensky stated that Hungarian leader Orban is using Ukraine in his election propaganda. By making an enemy out of Ukraine, he is doing Putin a favor.
We don't want Ukrainians dragging us into their war. We don't want Hungarians to go die for Ukraine. We don't want our farmers to go bankrupt. We don't want Europe to turn into their mafia nest. We don't want Hungarian money to be sent to Ukraine.
In addition, the Ukrainian president spoke about previously detained Hungarian spies who for some reason were gathering information about military facilities in Zakarpattia.
Why was it necessary to look for vulnerabilities in the Ukrainian-Hungarian border region? Why did the Hungarians want to obtain information about where we had deployed the S-300 air defense missile system there? That's what they were interested in. They even had a list of questions on their phones. We have it with 11 questions, including what the residents of Zakarpattia would say about the presence of Hungarian peacekeepers and where our various military units are stationed, as well as how we should respond to this during wartime.
Another friend of Putin, Slovak Prime Minister Fico, stated that he would block European Union sanctions until Russian gas is unblocked for him.
If there are sanctions that will harm us, I won't vote for them even if it costs money. There were about 3 months when some prime ministers wouldn't even greet us in the elevator, but sometimes you have to fight. And regarding the war in Ukraine, our position will ultimately prove to be the right one.
Up until now, they've somehow managed to maintain a certain balance, but there are already some serious threats coming from the leadership, both in Brussels and, by the way, in Germany, which is the main donor, the financial donor of the entire European Union. Serious threats are now being directed at these two countries.
Europe is not very active when it comes to pressuring Russia to end the war, and the US is gradually distancing itself altogether. On June 14th, Trump is planning to hold a military parade for the first time in more than 30 years, and on his own birthday, no less.
We will be celebrating Army and Flag Day, but also my birthday. But I won't be celebrating it. These events fall on the same day, so I'm a little upset. But it's going to be amazing. We're going to have a fantastic parade.
In light of the ongoing certain tensions with China, as well as the general militarization in the world, it's clear that Trump is choosing this kind of show of force as his tool. Well, if Putin was allowed to hold a parade on May 9th, then why shouldn't Trump hold one?
Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, protests against the deportation of migrants continue, and they are already spreading to other cities and states. Trump made an unprecedented decision to disperse the protesters using the National Guard and bypassing the governor of California.
The people in Los Angeles and California are lucky that we did what we did. We arrived just in time. Things are still a bit tense there, but not as much as before.
As I see it, this is just a way to shift the blame from the conflict that was going on between Trump and Musk. Now, Musk has changed his stance again, he's supporting Trump and says he lost his temper himself. And on top of that, it's also a way to shift attention from the conflict surrounding the tax bill.
Some analysts are already saying that with these actions, Trump is trying to make America more authoritarian, following Russia's example. That's why, for example, the idea is being actively promoted that Putin could help broker a deal with Iran and prevent the creation of nuclear weapons there.
Trump is creating, let's say, a certain window of opportunity for Putin to distance himself from the role of aggressor. Trump is seeking Putin's support here. He believes that the Russian dictator, based on his relationship with Iran, will be able to change the situation.
Meanwhile, in Russia, a meeting of the Security Council was held where they discussed not Operation Web and not the sabotage of the Kerch Bridge, but traditional values.
There is an aggressive struggle for influence over people's minds. Traditional values are now being declared outdated and archaic. At the same time, neoliberal, so-called neoliberal, but in practice, actually, totalitarian models are being pushed through. Moreover, they are not only being persistently implemented in a number of Western countries, but there is also an active attempt to export and impose them around the world. And it's clear why. Because by depriving nations of their value-based foundation, by stripping them of their sovereignty, it becomes easier to subjugate them, to turn them into vassals.
Putin is preparing a very serious specifically ideological foundation for expanding aggressiveness, for extending the conflict beyond the borders of Ukraine. In other words, this really is a threat to the Baltic countries, a threat to Poland, a threat to many, many others. And that's why I would approach this Security Council meeting with a certain degree of concern.
As usual, Putin accused Western countries of doing exactly what he himself has been doing in Ukraine for more than 11 years, erasing and stripping away sovereignty. What kind of pursuit of peace can we really talk about here?
Shock! Putin is preparing a mega battle in Belarus, 150,000 soldiers, and a new attack on Ukraine. Powerful strikes against Russia. Ukrainian missiles are ready for battle. This summer, the incredible will begin. The Kremlin is in a panic. Putin's last push is doomed. Russia's summer offensive will end in failure. And here's why. We will show the truth about what's happening on the front lines. Details, figures, and footage right now.
West 2025. Russia and Belarus are preparing a covert mobilization of up to 150,000 troops. The Zapad 2025 exercises, scheduled to take place in Belarus next year, could become Russia's largest military show of force since the start of the full-scale war. According to Latvian estimates, between 100 and 150,000 Russian and Belarusian troops will take part in the maneuver, several times more than the previously announced 12 to 13,000. Russia is no longer bound by the Treaty on Conventional Armed Forces in Europe, which previously limited the number of participants in exercises. Now Moscow can move any forces it wants without international oversight or notification. The number of participants also depends on the situation at the front in Ukraine. In the event of a ceasefire, Russia could quickly redeploy some of its troops to Belarus and begin intensive training of conscripts and reservists. Previous attempts at mass mobilization of reservists in Russia have failed. Now, the exercises can be used as a tool for mobilization training under the guise of drills. It is also important not to dismiss first and foremost the threat to Ukraine. This could serve as a potential staging ground for a new attack. Kyiv views the exercises as potential preparation for a new offensive against Ukraine from the north. The State Department does not rule out that the maneuvers could be used to cover the deployment of a strike force in the Belarusian direction. In this context, the involvement of Belarus in the war is also being considered something that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky previously warned about. The scale of the exercises and their composition indicate military political pressure and Moscow's intention to escalate. Meanwhile, Ukrainian missiles are almost ready for combat. Strikes on Russia could begin as early as this summer. Ukraine is finalizing the development of its own missile program, and as early as this summer, the first massive strikes on Russian targets using domestically produced weapons may begin. According to preliminary estimates, the strikes could be carried out at distances of 150, 200 kilometers and beyond. This will be an important milestone, as Ukraine will be able to strike enemy rear positions without relying on external permissions and restrictions. The production program is being actively accelerated. A key factor has been the possible acquisition of foreign technologies and equipment, which has made it possible to significantly shorten the timeline. The launch of serial missile deployment is now a matter of the coming months, especially since combat trials have already begun. Signs of the use of new missiles have already appeared at the front. In May, there was a sharp increase in precision strikes on Russian command posts, including the destruction of 3 Iskander missile system launchers. This may indicate that Ukrainian ballistic missiles are being combat tested in real conditions. It's not just about missile strike drones will complement missile power. In parallel with missile development, the field of strike drones is also advancing. In May, the Ukrainian armed forces received the heavy bomber drone White Wolf, capable of delivering a heavy payload to its target. In this way, Ukraine is building an independent strike system that combines missile weaponry and unmanned aviation. This is a new generation of weaponry already entering the battlefield without restrictions and with long-range potential. An investigation has appeared online from the well-known publication The Economist, where they explain why Russia's summer offensive is doomed to fail to achieve a breakthrough. According to analysts at The Economist, Russia's summer offensive in Ukraine is unlikely to end in strategic success. At most, what the Kremlin is counting on are local gains, which will be presented as a great victory to the domestic audience. According to Ukrainian intelligence, the main attacks are concentrated in the directions of Kostiantynivka, Pokrovsk, and the Sumy region. Up to 50,000 troops are concentrated on the northern border, who are advancing slowly but steadily deeper into the region. What is unusual is that, for the first time since the start of the full-scale invasion, the pace of the offensive in the north and in Donbass has been synchronized. According to experts from The Economist, this has become possible due to weak fortifications and insufficient protection against drones. Analysts also note that Russia is attacking with numbers, not with quality. Despite some partial advances, the front line has hardly changed at all in 3 years. Ukraine views the current wave as a final push, the goal of which is to break morale rather than achieve real success. Russia continues its offensive despite colossal losses. Up to 80% of those mobilized do not survive, but every month Russia mobilizes 10 to 15,000 more people than Ukraine. The Russian Federation incentivizes this financially and surpasses Ukraine in both the number and pace of mobilization. Analysts also note that for the first time a new Russian Rubicon bloc has been spotted in the area between Kostiantynivka and Pokrovsk. This is a specialized unit with access to modern drones and electronic warfare technologies. Its distinguishing feature is the use of mother drones that launch smaller devices with fiber optic or encrypted control. This has sharply reduced the advantage of the armed forces of Ukraine in the air, effectively depriving them of technological initiative. Despite this, key cities are holding out, but the tension is rising. Despite massive attacks, Kostiantynivka remains under Ukrainian control. However, both sides are suffering heavy losses, and the Ukrainian side feels them more acutely. Against the backdrop of the ongoing offensive, The Economist notes, the possibility for a diplomatic window may only arise after it ends, but there is no guarantee of this. The Kremlin does not need victory. It needs to create the illusion of success and maintain stable control. Ukraine, despite fatigue and difficulties, intends to hold the line even in a war of attrition, where the winner will be the one who can endure the longest. That's all for today. Tune in tomorrow for more news.
The Chimera Special Unit of the Main Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, with the support of their comrades, managed to hold a wide section of the front and stabilize the defense in the area of active combat operations. The special forces eliminated more than 30 Russian occupiers. In addition, more than 40 Russian soldiers were wounded and 2 were taken prisoner. At the same time, more than 40 Russian fortifications and engineering structures were destroyed. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian defenders continue to repel attacks by Russian occupiers in the Kursk direction. Over the past day, the Russian army carried out 13 airstrikes there, as well as 92 artillery attacks, including 3 from multiple launch rocket systems.
We can see that the Sever group operating there today is large and powerful. And in fact, the enemy trying to push our defense forces out, particularly from the Kursk region, would quite likely try to deploy these forces toward the Sumy direction to transfer part of them, including to the Pokrovsk direction, and quite possibly to reinforce the Pridniprovsk and Zaporizhzhia sectors of the front as well. But it is clear that today, in this head-on battle near Sumy and Kursk, especially in the Glushkovsky district and Tetkino, it is obvious that things are far from going according to plan for the enemy.
The situation on the eastern section of the front also remains tense. In the Lyman direction, Russian occupiers attack toward Kharkivka, Karpivka, Zelena Dolina. In the Pokrovsk direction, the enemy tried to storm near Mirolyubivka, Yelizavetivka, Kotlin, Udakhne, Novosergeyevka and Bodanivka. In the Novopavlivka direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled attacks near Boatyr, Komar, Novoselki and Burlatsky. The Russian occupiers are attacking not only on land, but are also trying to cross water obstacles. However, even there, the outcome for the invaders is predictable. The soldiers of the 1st Battalion of the 40th Separate Coastal Defense Brigade, using a drone, eliminated an assault group of the Russian army in a boat, destroying the entire group along with their vessel. An example of yet another rout of a Russian assault column was demonstrated by the fighters of the Defense Forces Battalion of the National Guard Brigade Rubezh. The Russian army tried to use a smoke screen. However, the enemy failed to completely block visibility and their column was destroyed. And the fighters of the National Police Brigade Lut showed how they managed to blow up the shelter of Russian occupiers who had settled in a half-ruined 5-story building. Thanks to the cover provided by armored vehicles with machine guns, the fighters were able to successfully approach the enemy without any losses. The soldiers planted bombs made from anti-tank mines in several locations at once to inflict maximum damage on the invaders. After that, they retreated and remotely detonated the building along with the Russians inside. Meanwhile, the fighters of the Pentagon Battalion demonstrated how they are reducing the enemy's equipment. The soldiers first tracked down and then with precision destroyed a Tiger armored vehicle. Its value is around $150,000.